Alrighty. Good evening, folks. It is Wednesday, June 13th, 2018. It is clicks after 5:30 p.m. It's the monthly meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Could we please have a roll call?
Frances Rigberg Baker.
Here.
Carol Bradford.
Here.
Stacy Burnett. Lisa Mosley.
Here.
Daniel Larson.
Here.
Peter Resnick.
Here.
Catalina Thomas.
Here.
Samuel Bindum.
Here.
Lolita Dumas. Brianna Donald.
Thank you. Looking over tonight's agendas, are there any edits, corrections, or additions that need to be made? Excuse me. Or if not, is there a motion to approve?
I moved.
That we approve.
Fran, you second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you. Looking over the minutes from our April 11th meeting, are there any additions, edits, or corrections that need to be made? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second?
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Public participation? Seeing none, hearing none, and having no new business, we're going to jump to new business, and we get to say hello to an old friend for a few minutes, thankfully, and also hear from a member of our community. So, Todd Rent, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, I think the public input, we had talked about maybe you going after the presentation to give context to your input. I want to make sure that everyone understands what's going on. Hello. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. For those of you who have not met personally, I'm Todd Rent. I'm with the City of Urbana Human Resources Office. I also do some work with the City Human Relations Office. And in this particular instance, I'm here to, I guess, provide some additional support and help to the Human Relations Office. So I'm appearing before you to review a draft language of revisions to Urbana City Code Section 2-119. It's entitled Discrimination in Employment by Contractors and Vendors with the City. You will most likely recognize this section of the code because this is the section of the code that allows the HRC to enforce workforce participation goals for city contractors and vendors. If you, as I'm sure you're aware, the City Council had a goals and priorities session earlier this year. One of those priorities that was set forth, I believe it was priority number 2, it was to increase minority participation in city procurement, hiring and contracting, and work with the Human Relations Commission, that's you, to develop a system to incentivize and advocate for the equity and increase minority employment rates. And then specifically, it set forth a goal that was to increase minority participation in city procurement, hiring, and contracting by 20%. So, again, the way that this particular provision or this particular section has been used in the past was to authorize and enable the Human Relations Commission to set forth workforce participation goals, particularly pertaining to minority participation and female participation for city contractors and city vendors that were above the threshold limits that were set in the section. So what we're doing with the language revisions, they are intended to authorize the city to set goals for the retention of minority and female-owned subcontractors in city-funded projects for goods and services. The revisions that we've used are based upon the ordinance that is currently in Peoria. When I reviewed several of the ordinances, it appeared that Peoria had initially had an ordinance that was very similar to the existing 2-119, and they ultimately incorporated the provisions that would permit the authorization of the participation goals for subcontracting. And so I thought that that would be a good point of departure, or a good jumping off point. Now, the point of my presentation here today is not to provide you with something that is completed, that's fully completed. It's initially to start a conversation with the city commission that is, that has the most institutional competence to review and to thoroughly vet this information and vet the approach to this going forward. What I would love to see happen is, once we've had a chance to thoroughly review it and discuss it, receive public participation, promulgate administrative rules for the enforcement of the authorization language, then taking that complete package along with the record of all the public discussion forward to City Council for their full consideration. And so if we have time, I just wanted to touch on just a few of the revisions that we've done, just to give you some context. And again, I think today is more of an introduction, and I want to go fairly quickly through this so that we have time for Patrick to come up and give his comments. He has an incredible amount of knowledge and expertise on the subject, and I think it's going to be really helpful for providing further understanding of the different issues that are at stake here. So on a very basic level, the revisions are as follows. In subsection A, we've modified the list of, and this doesn't really have to do with protected classes. It has more, or not to do with subcontracting participation goals. It has to do with kind of cleanup. There are a couple of cleanup things we did. So the first thing we did is we modified the language in subsection A to basically match the enumerated protected classes that are set forth or articulated in the Human Rights Ordinance, Chapter 12. In addition to that, we have moved the definition section. If you notice, in the current section, the definitions are at the end of the ordinance. And after some discussion with our legal counsel, really they like to see those definitions earlier. And I think the original language here was written back in the 70s, so it's time for a little bit of revamping. So what we've done is we've moved the definition section to the opening so that people know and have an understanding of the definitions of the terms that they're reading subsequently in the text. We have added definitions for minority-owned business, or MBE, women-owned or woman-owned business, WBE, minority/woman-owned business, M/WBE, subcontractors, and suppliers. So we've added definitions there. Again, much of those definitions, most of those are based upon what we found in Peoria and what we found in other similar ordinances across the state. Subsection C2 requires covered contractors and vendors to undertake good faith efforts to meet goals established, or established participation goals in subcontracting as a condition of compliance under the section. So this is really the heart of what we're doing, right? We're saying, before we said that in order to comply with the statute, you had to meet workforce participation goals. Now we're saying that in order to comply with the statute, you have to meet workforce participation goals and meet subcontracting goals for the participation of female and minority-owned businesses. There is also discussion as to whether it would be appropriate here to include veteran-owned businesses, and so that is a discussion that I think it would be helpful to have. Subsection C2 also sets forth the criteria that will be used to determine the weight of various forms of M/WE or WBE participation, whether or not that's full participation as a subcontractor performing work, or whether or not that's a supplier who is a manufacturer. And if you can imagine, what we're really trying to do is lay out some distinction between an individual or a company or a firm that may be a manufacturer of an item that is supplied for the purposes of the contract, as opposed to I'm a regular dealer of that item, as opposed to, well, I bought the item yesterday and now I'm going to pass that through to the main contractor. And I think Patrick and I had some discussion about that earlier today, and I think he's got really some very good insight to provide on that issue. Subsection E sets forth required contractual language for city contracts for goods and services. So in the past, we had a line in the ordinance that basically said that all city contracts would include a reference to Section A, the policy Section A. What this does is it requires reference to policy Section A, but it also explicitly requires verbatim language in that contract, which I think is very, very important because it sets everyone on notice of, within the four corners of the contract, everyone on notice of exactly what they need to do to comply. Let's see. Section F sets forth the required compliance reports and the requirement to cooperate with compliance reports and inspections, including periodic work site inspections. Subsection G sets forth penalties for non-compliance. We had set them forth previously, but I think we've put a slightly finer point on them in this language. And finally, subsection H1 task the HRC with the development and promulgation of administrative rules for enforcement of the section. And so this is, again, the beginning of the discussion. I would hope that as we move forward, we would basically be able to rely on the subject matter expertise and, quite honestly, the commitment that this commission has to these types of issues, so that we could conduct a full HRC review, have comment on the proposed language, and quite honestly to provide a venue for public input. So what we want to do is we want to facilitate a public discussion over the specific features of the plan, and we really want to specifically hear from stakeholders like Patrick and others who will be able to provide their knowledgeable perspectives on what we're planning to do so that we can anticipate any issues, any objections, and try to correct those issues prior to submission to the council. And then finally, we would like, obviously, to partner with the HRC in order to create and promulgate administrative rules in anticipation of the language, the passage of the language. Okay, was that over 5 minutes? Okay.
Good. You've been busy.
So, questions?
Peter?
I'll wait for Patrick for some of the content stuff, but one in particular that I noticed that I think is more a question for you. The change to Section A didn't include the "and everybody else" category.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about why you left it out in this?
So when we are able to, well, I'll put it this way. When we are dealing with a human rights complaint, typically you have us sitting down with an individual and going through the various, going through whatever situation or scenario they're dealing with, and we're having sort of this ongoing conversation about protected class. Do you feel that this was based upon your protected class status? The ordinance anticipates that there may be some time where that protected class status has not been specifically enumerated in the ordinance, but does not want to discourage us from moving forward and wants to provide some type of vehicle or mechanism for us to move forward. I think that that's very laudable. I think that makes a lot of sense. How that plays out in terms of enforcement of the ordinance, one of the things that you want to make sure is that people are on notice of the actual potential violation that they could be committing. So in that case, and I think there was probably one case where, during my tenure, where we had something that was not specifically, where we had something that was not specifically enumerated by the ordinance, but it had some other legally protected status that we were able to use. It makes sense when you're enforcing it with the ordinance. Here we're talking essentially about contractual provisions. And the idea that there may be a portion or term of the contract that is in some way undefined is a little more difficult. And if you notice, essentially, if you notice what we crossed out here in terms of the old language, we didn't include the rest of the protected classes. I think that that probably had more to do with the fact that it was focused on employment and focused on a very narrow range of minority participation in employment, right? We've obviously expanded that. I'm not sure, and I think we should just have further discussion over or not when you've got a contractual as opposed to an administrative / quasi-judicial enforcement proceeding, whether or not contractually you can enforce that term that is so ill or undefined.
And I absolutely understand what you're saying. Section A, though, is interesting in that it's sort of giving the overall purpose.
Yes.
That language is used later. And so, overall purpose-wise, I think we do want to say that include that or any reason that does not have to do with employment bit, or skills for employment, or however that's put. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think it's worth a conversation as we go forward.
That explained it, though. It was a little long-winded, Sherry.
Any other questions or comments before we, Brandon?
Also, having to do with Section A, and this may be not an issue for this document, but if this is a direct pull from the ordinance, I have a long-standing disagreement with one of the entries saying physical and mental disability, which I think is analogous to prior arrest or conviction record, and should be changed to either physical or mental disability, or the disability category should be listed separately. Because the whole thing is an or list. It's any one of these is sufficient, and you may have more.
Yes, in and
Yeah.
of itself.
Yeah.
As a disjunctive.
Right, I really don't like that, because it may make people think they have to have both kinds of problems.
Any other questions or comments for Todd? All right, well, thank you for coming. We look forward to the meetings ahead where we hopefully can be of some assistance.
Thank you, sir.
Cecilia, would like to introduce our,
Yes, I would.
Are-
This evening, we have with us who is prepared to have some public input, Mr. Patrick Thompson.
Wonderful.
From VIA, Inc.
alrighty. Good evening, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. Hi, I am here tonight to support this ordinance and to kind of talk a little bit about the program that you guys are looking at hopefully implementing. I am a contractor, local contractor, minority contractor, and I'm certified through Illinois CMS as a MBE firm, minority firm. And we perform primarily concrete work, demolition work, and we perform work on state projects, state agencies, and road work in municipalities. We are a union contractor, and so we hire out of the local union, and we also hire. We normally ask for diversity on our projects or when I call out workers, and so the program is designed to increase more minorities on construction projects. The certification that I am certified in, it's vetted. We have to send in a lot of documentation, taxes, personal taxes, stocks, and bank information. So it's a very vetted program. And once we go through the vetted program, they either accept or reject or ask us for additional information. This information, if we are approved, allows us to be certified as a whether you minority, female, now just recently veterans that have been added to the program. I say it's a state program. And the program allows us the opportunity to get on state projects. And so as when a state agency such as the university decides to put out a project that they want bidders to bid on, then there's a goal on that project. And that goal can be, that goal, and the university is 20%, then some other agencies might be lesser than that. But in that contents, we as minority firms or female firms are attending the pre-bid meeting. We are in discussion with the large contractors about scopes of work that we want to bid. And so, for example, if that project though is at $5 million, then 20% of that project has to go to a female or minority firm. Some other agencies split their goals. And so it could be either 12 MBE, 8 FBE, and in that contents, whoever the low bidder is out of those large contractors, they have an opportunity to select from a group of firms that have decided to bid that project. So that's kind of how it works in a nutshell. And I've been in business since 2009, so I've performed quite a few projects as a subcontractor, and some occasionally we do act as a prime contractor. The benefit of the program is to try. Well, the spirit of the program has always been trying to increase more minorities on construction projects, because they determined that there was, at some point in time, that there was a lack of that, and there was discriminatory practices and other issues that was preventing that. Most of the firms that you guys may be aware of that you see driving down the road or on the highway, those are probably 4th, 5th year generation construction firms. So a lot of them been around a lot longer than some of us been living. So they have, gained the experience, the capital, the equipment, the staffing, and so it's very hard for a firm such as a minority firm that maybe been in business 10, 15 years to compete with them to actually win a $5 million, $10 million, or $1 million project. Because that's just unrealistic. So that's the reason why you're seeing a lot of municipalities, school districts, state agencies adopting these requirements on construction projects. And so I say that to say that it would be the responsibility of the city of Urbana to understand that, and to say, okay, we are aware of this, and we are conscious of our responsibility, that we want to make sure that we are including, disadvantaged class of people that we know have been not able to have contracts with us directly. So that, I say that to say that, if you look at this ordinance and you kind of understand, or you want to educate yourself, then you can easily, look at some of the other cities, municipalities, and kind of see how their program has been operating. Or Todd, I'm sure he's, I'm sure he has the ability to bring that information to you guys. So I say that if you have any questions or anything, I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the commissioners or comments? I guess I'd have one. Was there a moment in time in your business, is there kind of a before you were kind of classified as an MBE? I just kind of, have you noticed any benefits in your business since How has it personally impacted you and your business?
I mean, it has, the personal impact is that I've been able to create jobs. So that's been the personal impact, and then the personal impact for me has been, the opportunity to work in construction and be able to learn and go through that process of having to learn, because I didn't step into a company that was already established, So a lot of learning I've had to learn by trial and error, or just so that's been the impact. And then trying to increase more diversity, with the trades and giving individuals opportunities, and just having a diverse diverse group of people working on a project for me. So that's been the impact of being able to see, the benefit of the program, because I'm actually participating, and so I get to see what works and what does not work, and I'm able to share that, to the compliance people that run the program, or be able to have that conversation with, hey, you may need to look at this because this is not working for us, and and they may see it, and sometimes they may not see it. So it may take a few different conversations with them to say, hey, maybe look at doing this different. I think one of the things we've been really discussing is doing some unbundling and set aside to kind of because the projects are so large for individuals such as myself to bid those projects, because there's the bonding, the capital, and it's like trying to walk into a bank and say, hey, I want to purchase this $10 million home. And it's like, that's not going to happen. So I say that to say that, yes, it has been a impact, and as well as other minority firms and female firms that have been able to benefit from the program. There has been great impact for them, and they've been able to grow and and been able to do work and create that pool of diversity.
Wonderful. Vasilia, I'm sorry. Okay. Fran?
You mentioned that you like to use, or you do employ union workers on your work, and I was wondering how that has played in relation to your desire to increase diversity in your workforce. I mean, has it made it harder, easier? Has there been any change over the time?
Well, the diversity part and trying to get more minorities or African Americans in the trade, that's a challenge, because a lot of the individuals don't have that construction experience growing up. That doesn't mean they're not hard workers and could be good workers, but it's just that exposure that they didn't, and that could be, contribute to a lot of factors of technology now, and and things that have not allowed them to be able to have those as like when we was going to school, we had wood shop, mechanical, we had those type of trades and things, and whereas now it's more technology, so a lot of them don't have that exposure at a young age, so it's hard for them to get into those unions because they don't have that knowledge, so you see more of the rural areas because a lot of them are growing up on farms and in small towns, so they probably used to, or at some point in time maybe worked on something. So that's been the challenge, but you are seeing a effort to get individuals into the unions, and the ones that get in there are working and they are learning, and so that's the good part of it,
Other questions, comments? Peter?
So I want to first understand the interaction. Is there something in the minority-owned business program that requires you to have a diverse workforce, or is that something completely independent?
Well, they, you know, as African American, you know, they like, you know, there's been instances where they like to see me have some diversity, you know, on that project.
But it's not part of the certification for getting,
No.
Okay.
No, it's not part of certification, but, I mean, that comes with the territory, you know, as a minority firm. You know, you have that, that demand sometimes to say, hey, you know, and we've, you know, I understand that, so we've tried to, you know, keep individuals or individuals that come work and, you know, they come back, and so, you know, we try to get those that are just coming in as apprentices out on the jobs, and, you know, as well as some of the large contractors, you know, I've seen some do their due diligence in having that same type of workforce, you know, out there, so.
So the other part of my question, you mentioned the 20% that some state institutions are doing.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't see a particular percent in the current set. And when we're doing our workforce stuff now, we're sort of giving it a real look and saying, does that look like they're gaining, or you know, whether it meets a particular number isn't part of our review process now. Sometimes it'll be well above a number, but we'll say, hey, there's something funky here because they've only hired Hispanics and nobody who is black. Why'd that happen?
Yeah.
What's your feeling about whether there should be a number or how much freedom we should have to play around with that stuff?
Well, that definitely depends on the type of work that you're performing. You know, so, you know, asbestos, baby, you know, you won't see minority firms in this area that do asbestos work. You know, you may have to go to Chicago or, you know, major city, you know, so you have to take that into consideration. But primarily, you know, when you're talking about concrete work, you know, you'll see us, you know, or you know, another one's probably asphalt. You know, there's only 2 companies that I know in town that do asphalt. You know, so if you don't have $1 million, you have a plant, then, you know, you probably don't have a chance, and, you know, to be able to do asphalt work. Now, that doesn't mean you might not can do small parking lots or other things of that nature, but you still have to, probably would have to go to them to get that material. So
you're comfortable with us not having a hard percentage, but saying, hey, if you're doing concrete work, you better have some minority representation or MBs. If you're doing asbestos, maybe we give you a little leeway or something.
I think if, you know, from what I've saw is there's always hard goals, and then those can be adjusted or reflected based upon the project.
Gotcha.
You know, but I've always saw hard goals, you know, and that way they're established, because you have to look at it and say, okay, well, maybe you get someone that wants to start asbestos abatement company here, you know, and once that company is here, then, you know, that would give them the opportunity to participate. And so that now, you know, like I said, the spirit of the program, hopefully, that they would be able to now to become a direct, you know, have direct contracts with the city. So that's always, you know, if it wasn't for the goals, then I don't think I would be able to have been on any projects at all, or even bid as a prime sometimes on projects that have been unbundled, where I've been able to, you know, win some of those projects in the experience. So, you know, but that's what I've always seen is
So
those
hard goal for the contract and
Yeah.
maybe flexible goals across
Yeah, or,
contracts.
you know, and that is established through, you know, good faith efforts and you know, what is the good faith efforts and those things. So, you know, because sometimes you do have real specialty type of work where you have very limited individuals or companies that can do the work, you know, period. So, you know, but that doesn't excuse not to have those goals for them to because you don't know who they may have been doing prior business as a subcontractor with, you know, so you couldn't possibly know that.
Todd?
I just wanted to point out, and as you're having this conversation, it's bringing me back to subsection C2. If you'll notice in that provision, there's a section that there are two different types of goals that are set forth. There are the subcontractor participation goals. Those will ultimately be set annually by the mayor. And that's sort of the general aspirational goal. And then you have the workforce participation goals, which we are ceded to the Human Relations Commission for setting annually.
Thank you, Todd. Carol?
I have a question, and it's for either Mr. Rent or, sorry, Patrick, I forgot your last name already. So just for clarification, is the intent that because we know so many women and minority-owned businesses won't have the capital or equipment to bid on the multi-million-dollar projects, that if a company that is able to bid and be a primary contractor, the expectation is because a lot of them do subcontract for different portions of that job, that they are making good faith effort or can show that certain percentage of that subcontracting is going to women and minority-owned businesses, as well as with the idea of trying to grow the opportunities for those businesses. I'm just trying to, like,
So I can answer that initially. So, yes, I think that's a really concise statement of what we're trying to do.
okay.
And in terms of this authorizing language, it's the former. It is where you have a prime contractor for these large bids that are going to require subcontracts. When that individual goes out to find subcontractors, they have to make those good faith efforts, which ultimately means, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, reaching out to qualified minority and female-owned contractors who are certified to do that work and certified as such, right?
Okay.
So that's one piece of the puzzle. But you also mentioned building the capacity of small contractors and startup contractors. One of the things that we're also looking at and exploring and we'll be discussing is how to do that. And Patrick had mentioned unbundling, and over the course of, I don't know how many years has it been, there have been certain contracts that we've been able to provide for the purpose of capacity building. We want to look at that in a more systematic way also, or as we go forward.
Okay.
And one more thing I'd like to touch on, and most of your large contractors that you see doing work, they do work across the state, so they are already really familiar with the goals and the programs. So this is not something that you would be blindsiding them with. So they're familiar with them. They already have, direct relationships with subcontractors, minority contractors, female contractors, veterans. So this is not, because they do work across, City of Urbana, Champaign, other counties. So it's not something that they would all of a sudden say, well, this is new to us. So they're accustomed to it. They know them. The majority of them meet their goals. And there's some that will try to circumvent that and not meet their goals, or try to find a way to circumvent the process. But you know, when you have a program or good compliance, you know, you're able to vet those, you know, and you know, make them play fair, and they'll eventually, you know, do as the ones that believe in the program or believe in the spirit of the program or actually meet their goals. You know, they'll fall in line, but it's not. You know, this is something that they are very, very, very much familiar with.
Great. Any other? Fran?
No, this is for either of you. Hopefully, we do have or will have, as a result of this sort of thing, primary contractors who are minority or female-owned. And when that occurs, does it change anything? Or are the same requirements still in place?
Oh, in terms of participation by subcontractors? That's a great question.
Well, what I've seen
Yeah,
is that, say you have a project where there's just say 12% MBE and 8% FPE, and I am bidding that as a right now I'm bidding the job right now where I have to bring in FBE participation. So I'm actively, you know, trying to find a FBE firm, or you know, and discussing with them about bidding certain scopes of work. So there is that requirement for us as well. Now the MBE part, that has already been established because I am a minority firm. So that percentage has been met, but that female percentage or woman percentage, I would have to meet that.
Okay, so those are separate requirements. Yes, they are.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
they
right,
are separate,
Now-
distinct requirements. And
That's good.
Now,
That's good.
some agencies don't have split, so,
Right.
you know, it will count 100%, you know, either way, you know, but
Sure. Non-subcontracted. Non-subcontracted contracts. I mean, if it's just one person who's the primary, one company that's the primary and they don't subcontract, they don't need to, then it's 100% either way, as you said.
yeah, some state agencies, I believe, I think the university, you know, if you have if you're either female or minority, then you know, because they don't have split goals. So you can,
Oh, I see.
So-
We're talking about two different things.
yeah.
Okay.
But some agencies have them. You know, some agents have that. The Champaign School District has it. They have split goals. So, you know, they require, you know, you to bring in that percentage.
Okay.
Peter?
One quick one for Todd. I know some years ago with UC2B, there was this question of how we set up the MBFE program. Is that set up, or is there work to be done there for the
UC
city to use? There was something about having to do a study to establish.
all that's, yeah.
All
that's
that stuff.
Disparity study.
Are we able to piggyback on the
Can't tell you-
state, or
yeah, I
how
can't
how
tell
is
you
that?
how much I was hoping you would ask that question. You know, what I will do is I'll say this. That's a very, very complicated question. Because the whole point, or how the disparity study industry even came about, is interesting because it's based upon some dicta language that was written into a case that, so I'll just say this. I believe that it is appropriate that we go forward with looking at this language, looking at the authorization, putting the package together for city council consideration. I'm certain as it gets to the city council level there will be that question, but I believe that, you know, ultimately it will be a policy decision as to whether or not to move forward with or without a disparity study. And I will point out another thing. You had asked a question before about if you have a minority-owned business that is the prime contractor or even the subcontractor, are there still standards in terms of diversity within that workforce? And the same standards that would apply in terms of our workforce participation standards are the standards that would apply to that sub, if that helps address it. Because theoretically, you could have a minority owner and then a completely non-diverse staff. And so you want to hit it from both angles.
Right.
Any final questions or comments? All right, thank you both for coming in,
Thank
and we
you
look
so much
forward
for your
to
time.
our future conversations.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to our staff report, and Pete's actually going to slide in to finish up the meeting. Thank you.
All right.
See you guys. Talk to you guys later.
All right, Vasilia, since it is the staff report, where would you like to start today?
Assuming everyone has the complaint form. Since our last meeting, which we didn't have a meeting in May, there have been 3 contacts to the office, and pretty much has not resulted in any formal complaints being taken, just basically inquiries. There was a situation, a housing issue, that I have not quite determined whether or not a formal complaint will be completed on this particular one or not, but the other 2 resulted in no formal complaint.
Any questions about that? All right, moving on.
Okay, and I quickly put together just a summary of projects that I'm working on with the city and in my capacity as HRO, just so that you guys will have a complete understanding of what's going on in that office and what kinds of things you can expect down the road. And I will briefly go through these. I just kind of labeled them as projects, and I think you're familiar with the first one, the Vehicle for Hire ordinance. It's still in the works. We'll probably go to before City Council before the end of July. But I wanted to include this because part of our work will be to establish hearing rules once the City Council approves of the amendments in this ordinance. So just kind of keep that on the back burner. Then number 2, I'm working a little bit with the community development. Well, I'm sorry, this is Todd. I'm working with Todd, of course, on the current ordinance that was just presented before you guys. It's complicated, and I think that we will have to have a number of meetings. One of the things I don't think we've done is we have not talked about possibly a commission retreat, where that could be like a working session where we could really hammer out and get our recommendations together to move forward and present to Todd. And the other thing that I'd like for you guys to think about is whether or not you want to have a public hearing on this. All of that, I believe, would be appropriate for the commission to decide upon. The number 3 is a housing. I just put housing because in the community there's concerns about some impediments that may exist in terms of housing, and I've been invited to sit into a working group with the Community Development Department that includes county-wide representatives that will be discussing those types of impediments that may exist, for example, in Rantoul. bus service, for example, those kinds of things. And so they're tasked with getting together a list of, and agreeing upon a list of impediments that we will begin to take a look at and trying to address and come up with some solutions, is my understanding. And so that's kind of an ongoing project. So I will report as information becomes available as to where we are and what's it looking like and shaping up to be. Number 4 is basically a huge a vision of a project here. One of the things that I've met with some internal staff and some community leaders is to discuss the whole technology piece for adults, basically. There is a project currently in place in Detroit, Michigan, where I think it's a 10-week program, and they actually take adults and train them on coding. And so the committee that I'm working with, including Monique, we've kind of decided that we want to take baby steps. First of all, identify what training opportunities already exist within our community, and that's pretty much where we are now. And amazingly, Urbana Library has some really great things going on over there, and so we're going to start kind of promote what activities they have available, and as we build on this idea, we will include other community resources as well. And phase 2 of this idea is to maybe have an information fair where companies and organizations can come in and talk one-on-one with attendees about the types of things that their organization is doing, what kinds of coursework or training you would have to qualify to do certain things like develop apps, or what kind of skill level would you need to have to get involved in coding, those kinds of things. So mostly an information fair, and we're looking maybe toward the fall or the end of the year possibly. And the last phase is the hefty phase, where we're talking about an actual boot camp program where and focused on coding. And of course that would require a lot of community support and participation, but that is the ultimate goal. That's great. Any questions on that? Then number 5 is our ongoing efforts with our community police relations. Preston is very, 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 very involved. That is really his baby. But I'm available for any questions or brainstorming he may want to do. And then last but not least is the Martin Luther King program. We're working on that. Urbana chairs for the 2nd year in a row, chairs this endeavor, and so that's ongoing. We meet pretty much monthly. We've been doing phone conferences, but probably around in September we'll start actually meeting in person. But the planning is underway.
I think, going back to number 4,
Mm-hmm.
I think an important thing in the information fair will be publicizing it to get lots of people.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if we still had resources for things like website development and so on. I know we had some in relation to the now defunct International Humanitarian Awards Commission, and I know there was some staff available for that. Do we still have any resources like that in the city that you were?
I'm not sure. I can
I can't
definitely.
remember their name.
There were actually people.
There was a person, yes.
Really?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Was it Sanford Hess?
It was.
Because
a
he's
woman.
the IT
IT.
director here.
Okay. There was a woman who worked with Alex on web development, and she seemed to be sort of a marketing,
Oh, I remember this vaguely, yeah.
yeah,
With Carla?
I can look back.
Okay.
Anyway, I was just saying that's a great idea, and hopefully we would have some kind of support like that to do
Okay.
a really
Well-
bang-up.
Well, one of the community members that I'm working with is from the Workforce Development Center. And she was, I think she has a wealth of resources available to her. So, but yeah, this is something that, first we have, step number one would be getting commitments from employers throughout town to participate. And then, of course, then marketing it, making sure that it is well attended, so, yeah.
All right, any other questions for Vasily about that?
Okay. All right.
Then, let's go on to EEO workforce statistics. A nice long list for this month.
Yes, that's what we get for taking a month off, huh? Any questions or concerns about any of them?
Give folks a minute to quickly look through. So, I did have one quick question. I was looking through the materials for corrective asphalt, which to me was the most, the one that stood out the most as far as statistics went. They had 9 employees last time, according to this. Are they required to file their numbers even if, because it says that they got a 1-year previous certification, but normally I would think for 9 people, we would have just given them the 2 automatically. What happened there?
I'm not sure why we ended up giving them 1 year. Because you're right, we would have normally just gave them a.
Give them the
pass.
2 and let them go.
But they've increased the number of employees that they have.
Tremendously, well, percentage-wise tremendously.
Yes.
They've doubled in size, or more than doubled in size.
And we were left in kind of a quandary because they didn't pick up any minorities as a result of doubling
That's right.
their workforce.
One additional person.
Mm-hmm. So we just decided that this was going to be a recommendation, and you guys could, in your infinite wisdom, could figure out what's reasonable.
And the only reason I even asked the question is if we gave them 1 year last time and they got a letter saying you need to be doing something, then there's an open question as to what we do this time. If they've never gotten a letter before and now we've seen that the numbers are that high, then we can send them the 6 month, it seems to me.
Monique informs me that they did not get a letter.
They didn't get a letter. Okay, so that changes the dynamic a little. All right. So, anyone want to make a motion either for some, all, or however you want to do it? We'll have some time to discuss if people want to make a motion that's different than the recommendation. You want to do them in 2 bunches? Someone do the new ones? You can't rely on me to just babble incoherently forever. Someone else has to make the motion.
All right. I move that, can I simply, that we accept the grant, the new applicants as follows. Robinson Engineering, 2 years. Seiler Instrument Manufacturing, 1 year. Key Equipment and Supply Company, 1 year. Kinney Contractors Incorporated, 1 year. Benioff Construction, 2 years. And Jackaslap Construction. They
I've
get
seen
it
their
on name
commercials,
alone.
yeah.
2 years.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so that's a motion by Fran, second by Catalina. Any discussion? All right, well then, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that motion carries. All right. It looks like a longer list, but it's not that much longer. It's got more lines to it. Someone want to make a motion regarding the renewals?
Do you want them all read individually?
Sure, why not?
Okay, I move that we approve the renewal for Pierce Manufacturing for 2 years, Corrective Asphalt for 6 months with a letter, Deuce Construction for 1 year, Hanston 6th Street for 2 years, Ayers International Incorporated for 2 years, Lucity, did I say that correctly? 1 year, Hall Signs, 1 year, Lucity again.
It's a duplicate.
Excuse me, my bad. Owens Excavating and Trucking for 2 years. Nix Incorporated for 2 years. CDS Office Systems Incorporated for 1 year. And Koenig Body and Equipment Incorporated for 2 years.
All right, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Lisa, second by Carol. Any discussion, questions? Oh, good. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that carries. Easy peasy. All right, going back to my agenda, are there any announcements? Please.
Preston.
Got to give you a microphone in the back so you don't have to, crawl up to the stage here.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
Is it on?
There
No.
you go.
All right, there we go. So I'm just going to talk about 3 things real quick, and then we're going to get out of here. So the first one, we have Jetty Rose Day out at King Park coming on the 23rd, which is Saturday. We will be handing out your guys' information, so it would be good if we had a few of you come out. It's from 12 to 4. You don't have to be out there the whole time. I will be, but it'd be nice to see your faces. Come give me a cold bottle of water, something like that, right? Hand out some of your pamphlets. I believe we will have some new pamphlets for you guys. It's going to be card stock, the hard card stock kind of shiny paper. Have a lot of good information about the HRC and things of that nature. 23rd, King Park, 12 to 4. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is there's a community meeting about ending the gun violence in our community. As you guys know, we just recently had one on Lincoln, where someone was driving down Lincoln and shot into another car. I mean, this is an epidemic for us. They're having a meeting on June 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Douglas Branch Library, and that is located at 504 East Grove Street in Champaign. But it's a Champaign-Urbana problem, which is why we're announcing this here. The third and final thing, I think this is a very good thing. Champaign Police is having a ALICE training. If you're not familiar with ALICE stands for, it's alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. As for active shooters, it's going to focus on like local churches, but it can be for any building that you may be in. If you're in a grocery store, the same principles will apply. This is going to be on June 22nd at Vineyard Church here in Urbana at 1500 North Lincoln, Urbana, Illinois, from 6 to 8 p.m. on June 22nd at Vineyard Church from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. There is a pre-registration. that they asked for you to at least have in by the 21st, just so they have a head count. There's no cost. And the pre-registration link, not that I expect for you to write this down, but it's http://Alice, ALICE, the Vineyard Church, all spelled out, no hyphens, no dots, no spaces, .us. Thank you. Is there any questions?
I have a question kind of off. Does the city employees ever do like Alice trainings, or have you guys ever participated in that?
Absolutely. As far as being trained or training others?
Both.
Both, yes.
Well, I definitely understand why you would, just working in a school, we do those annually.
Right. They call them like Code Red at the schools, though. And then they do Alice as well.
They do both, yeah.
The what they've done here at the city of Urbana is there's a video that they send out, and it kind of goes over a lot of the Alice information. And then if you have additional questions, Lieutenant Norton is our go-to here. So the answer is yes to both.
Okay.
Is there any other questions?
Not
Yes,
a
ma'am.
question, but I just wanted to follow up with the community meeting and just put a call out, since we are televised, that as part of the trying to address the gun violence, I'm actually on the MDT subcommittee of the coalition for the CU Fresh Start program. I supervise the young man that does the intensive case management services. We are in need of more community voices and social services voices at that table. So even if you're not interested, if you could mention it, and folks can use the email that's on our Human Relations website to reach me. We're trying to get more voices around the table and new voices. So if anyone's interested, we could really use the support. And again, just more input from those in the community, whether it's businesses, social services, or people that live in the neighborhoods, to come and help us to try and address it. So I just wanted to put that plea out there on the air. That
I concur. That's exactly what this meeting is for.
All
Anything
right.
else?
Thanks, Preston.
All right, thank you.
Any other announcements for today? Well, with that then, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.